Welcome to Books in the World, a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center. Many of you have seen this show before, but for those of you who haven't, we bring together authors who belong to this organization on the Cape. I think it's one of the oldest writers organizations anywhere. And they provide workshops and networking, lectures, breakfasts, and we are lucky to get a chance to talk with some of them. And today we have Reverend Dr. Judith Campbell, who is the author of the Olympia Brown Mystery Series, and Judy, who we're going to call Judy today, and not Reverend Doctor or Dr. Judy today. It's not Sunday, or we're not.
Yeah, I'm not marrying you.
You're not officiating today. You are a Universalist minister. Unitarian
Universalist minister.
Obviously, I have a little trouble with the UUs. We're trying to remember which comes first.
Just UU is easy.
UU is easier. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, and then you can tell us how you got to become an author of this series as well.
Well, I'm a community minister. I was ordained as a community minister, which I'm a street person as opposed to a pulpit person. Although I have served a church, I served a church on Martha's Vineyard. But
before you go on with that, this street minister, is this a large group of people who choose to do this? Are you one of a few, or how does this?
It's a small percentage in the denomination. Most people want to go for parish ministry, but mine is a denomination that does recognize special ministries. And really and truly, my writing is my ministry, or it's a major part of my ministry. Writing books about ethical challenges, not so much religious subjects as how religion figures into people's lives and how people can use religion to harm rather than to inspire. I write a lot about religious hypocrisy, how a lot of evil is done in the name of religion. I think any one of us can read any newspaper, you'll see that.
Unfortunately,
yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
It happens. I don't know whether we didn't know about it in the past, but now we do. But before we get theological, which we might end up getting back to getting a little more, it may happen. Let me just get you right into the book that we're going to talk about today. Is A Singular Mission, which is the 7th in the Olympia Brown Mystery Series. And I always like to give you a little puffed up feeling by reading some of the great reviews, things that people have said about your books. And this one says, a satisfying and thrilling read right to the end, highly recommended for mystery lovers and for people who love Cape Cod, Massachusetts. So this book is about Olympia accepting a winter contract in a Cape Cod church. And she gets...
It's a sabbatical fill-in.
Yeah.
I like to move her around. I don't want to leave her in one town because I'd get bored.
Okay.
So I move her from place to place to place, and so short-term ministries, which ministers do.
Okay.
You know, not all of us.
Fill-in.
Fill-in or an interim ministry. Some of us prefer short ministries, and I'm one of them. So.
You know, it occurred to me that I was a librarian, and I loved being a librarian. And when I became the director, I did a lot of administrative work that wasn't very librarian-like, and I was thinking about you as the minister, the interim minister. You get to go around and be a minister rather than
exactly.
You're not fixing the roof unless you have to.
I'm not fixing the roof. I'm not fundraising, and I can come in and be a minister, and serve a church for another colleague, to come in and support that person's ministry while they're away having a baby, on study leave, whatever. It's a challenging and it's a lovely thing to be able to do, you know, and meet a whole lot of wonderful people and then get out before they put me on a committee.
Well, this one, it's Cape Cod in the Winter. Now, this was a perfect book for this season. Just as she gets, Olympia gets stuck in the church with someone who is not exactly a comfortable human being to be around, and we might get into that a little bit longer. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about your protagonist, Olympia Brown? What kind of a person is she, and how does she operate?
I said earlier today that fiction is memoir with its clothes off, which is a little graphic. But I named my character Olympia Brown because the real Olympia Brown, it's not modeled on her all that much, sort of, kind of, but the real Olympia Brown was the first woman ordained to a nationally recognized denomination and had national standing. She was ordained to Universalist ministry before the two denominations merged in 1863. And that was a huge accomplishment. Women were constitutionally able to deal with things like higher education and the rigors of study and the rigors of ministry. Well, she kicked that out of a cocked hat and said, no, I will do this. And she fought like crazy to get into divinity school. They didn't want her. Then she had to fight again to be ordained. But she was ordained, and she took a church. One church she took for a short time was in South Weymouth, Massachusetts.
Really?
She had a little tiny, and I've preached in that church. It's really, I want to kiss the pulpit when I'm there.
It's for you. Yeah.
And some of her documents are there. It's very exciting. Yeah. The reality was her passion was education for women and the women's vote. So she stayed in active ministry for only 10 years and then left active ministry. She never renounced her vows or anything, but just took her ministry out into the street to fight for women's education and the vote for women. She lived long enough, she lived to be 91 years old and lived long enough to vote.
Wow.
So, and she had 2 kids. She never changed her last name, and her husband was completely supportive of her and her mission. And you can see how all of this is developing. So to honor her, I chose her name. Plus, I think the name Olympia is absolutely beautiful.
Oh, it's right at the top of the mountain, isn't it?
Yeah, and who doesn't love Olympia Dukakis? I mean, what a wonderful actor she is.
I thought I might segue for a minute here just to mention a couple of a popular book right now on this invention of wings by Sue Monk Kidd, where she picks up the story of, this is based on a true story of 2 women who began to speak out against slavery in the North. And it has quite a lot to do with the abolition movement, but the parallel that I saw was that when they went around speaking in the same time period, they were scandalizing people because women weren't even supposed to speak in public.
Oh my God, no.
So for someone to become a minister at the same time when Lucretia Mott and these women were out there, and then I wanted also to mention Marge Piercy's Sex Wars. Marge is our Cape author that we adore. If you haven't read Sex Wars, it's about the same period of history, about the women's struggles to advance in a lot of different ways, and not only for the vote. But anyway, that I just thought was an interesting segue when I heard about your Olympia, which is...
Well, there's and I'm not going to be able to remember all of it, but I should have brought it. There's a prayer or a reading in the back of our hymn book that we use often, and it says, "Stand by this faith. Stand up for what you believe in." I'm paraphrasing now, but stand by this. Stand up for your values. Don't be put aside. Don't be put down. How are you going to promote what is right and just if you don't stand up for it? That's a paraphrase, but I mean, she was a passionate, strong woman. She was. So I named my protagonist, I named her after Olympia Brown, but the Olympia Brown in the books is a thinly disguised Judy Campbell.
Okay, I got that. I think I got that.
Not very thinly disguised. Judy Campbell has an English husband. Judy Campbell has 2 cats. Judy Campbell has had a lot of gay friends, a lot of gay clergy friends. Judy Campbell is straight, but Judy Campbell has been an advocate for equality and justice for all people all of my life.
I'll pull you back to this story where Olympia Brown meets this young woman who got danger signals right from the beginning. And Olympia is very careful. She just knows how to be Olympia Judy, just knows how to deal with this person. And I might as well say this theme of this particular book is mental illness. But you as a pastor, or Olympia as a pastor, know how to do it. Would you like to read this passage?
I would. Yeah, there's something I want to say afterward too, if I remember it, but I'll read this right
Okay.
now. That is, ministers do a lot of counseling.
Right.
But unless you are, I mean, I'm trained to do it, but I'm not trained to do deep counseling. Right. And as a minister myself, if I can do immediate intervention kind of stuff, but long term, I always make referrals. You need to know your limits. It's very easy for a minister to play God because so many people want you to act like God. And it's really important to say, no, I can't do this, but I know someone who can. So this is about a female stalker. And right. This is based on a true story that happened a long time ago, where a woman fell in love with a minister and just kept following her, and then it turned really nasty. But in the story here, the woman who is following after Olympia the minister, the victim, or the bad gal, right. Is sitting in Olympia's office, and Olympia is trying to come to terms with some of her issues. The two women were making meaningless small talk. Olympia knew Eileen would eventually get around to the reason for her being there, but now they were chatting, softening the edges of the space in the room and the distance between them. If she spoke too quickly, Eileen might bolt. Olympia had engaged in this kind of dance many times before. There was a distinct rhythm to it. Advance and hold, advance and hold. And finally, the connection. Reverend? Yes, Eileen. Olympia spoke in a soft voice.
I did enjoy reading that about the dancing, advancing and holding, advancing and holding. Olympia has a lot of insight. She's very kind to this woman right from the beginning. You sense that, like in this paragraph, she knows how to handle situations like this. However, does she tend to take chances that maybe she shouldn't take?
Oh, just a few. Olympia can't stop trying to help the underdog. She doesn't play God. That's really an important piece of that, and I really talk about it in one of the other books, that, you know, we talk about God, or the God of our understanding, which is different for many people, but in this particular role, it's very important never to try and play God. And some unethical ministers do, and one of the books is about that, someone who gets carried away with his own power. And where was I going with this?
Well, I don't know, but I'm segueing to, well, we were talking about her taking chances.
Oh, yes.
But which ultimately does lead to the climax of the
that was
of the story. But at the same time, that she does take a lot of chances in opening the door to this Emily character. She's very professional about what she does, and this is almost like a primer in how to do it right, until she lets her in at the end, and I was biting my nails about what was going to happen. But
so that piece really held together for you.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, these are pretty suspenseful, but in the beginning, you do document your conversations with her. You call the minister who's on leave. You talk to your board, and you do it right from the beginning. And I was, as a former librarian who's had problems with people that you have to deal with as well, I had a lot of admiration for that. And in the same vein, at the point, I don't know how you feel about spoilers, but this young woman does make a rather serious pass at the minister, and she and you, the minister, takes a number of steps toward covering the situation. You might, I can say, you write down the story, you email your board, you tell the prior minister what happened. It occurred to me, though, that people in your position, or in this kind of position, have been accused. Now, you can tell the audience how much you want to tell of the plot, but what if it had gone the other way, where the board didn't believe you about what happened?
I never thought about it in that, what would I do? Then I have seen people lose their churches over this. That if the board does not back the minister, and there could be history behind that, but if the board doesn't stand behind the minister and believe the accuser, and we've seen this happen in schools, we've seen it, somebody just takes against somebody, okay, if I want to ruin them, I'll make a charge of sexual harassment, and you almost never can get past that. And it's a very, very dangerous and very cruel thing to do. So the advice embedded in that book, and in many of the other ones, is speak up. The minute you feel threatened, and that's for kids. I mean, I wrote a book for children about being approached by someone that doesn't feel healthy. But if you feel something isn't right, do not try and handle yourself. Don't play God. If something doesn't feel right, go to your board. Most churches have sort of a committee for the minister, where the minister can immediately go and say, hey, this happened, but keeping a record of something, telling your supervisor, so you have a paper trail. And if someone is feeling threatening to you, then you never get alone in a situation where you're alone with them. A lot of offices now have glass windows all over the place, so you're never a minister, particularly if it's a man minister and a lady, or people of the opposite sex. So there's always witnesses around. You never meet anybody alone in a darkened church by yourself. Those are kind of some of the rules of human interaction that you need to be. But you're a minister. Ministers are human. Ministers get stalked and approached, and people build fantasies around us. They do. And then when they find us in the bathroom, or they find us fixing a bra strap or something, oh my God, you're human, and they don't want us to be human. And so that's one of the things you deal with. That you deal with. And dealing with unethical behavior. Most of my books are about unethical behavior, and they take place in church settings or religious settings, because my belief that religion is personal, it is very, very precious, but it's also a place where we're most vulnerable, where we open ourselves to something beyond ourselves. And a church is supposed to be a safe place for you to do that. And there are people who use that openness. I mean, we talk about cult behavior when some children have been kept, have been denied food because the cult leader said, don't feed that baby. And the baby died. I mean, so people do some pretty awful things in the name of religion. So you got to stay open.
It was very refreshing and comfortable to read these moral principles being played out in a nice story, in a light story, in a mystery. And it occurred to me that I don't perhaps know too many books that sort of cover religion or morality openly, in a way. And it's always a theme of people's struggles with life and beliefs and all that, or disbeliefs. But mention a few authors that people might enjoy if they want to read sort of morality being played out.
Very new author is Louise Penny. She's good. Julia Spencer Fleming writes deliberately about, she writes about a lady minister who's a former helicopter pilot. Very interesting, good character. She's a very good character. Let's see, Susan Howich is a little bit older, and she writes a lot of books. I haven't read too much of her stuff, but it's set in Anglican churches. The Brother Cadfael mysteries set in the monastery in the 13th century, everybody loved those. They were just marvelous. And two authors who don't write religiously specifically, but who carry this into their writing. One of them is P.D. James, who, she's just a brilliant writer, who happens to be a mystery writer, God rest her soul. But she would kind of go off to the side and just start writing sort of an essay on the ethics of what was happening, and then she'd weave herself back into the story. And I used to love those passages. And the person who did that before I started reading her was an author who was writing in the 60s, John MacDonald, who was a mystery writer. His character was Travis McGee.
Oh, yeah.
And set in Florida and on boats. And Travis never, I mean, Travis was a clean guy. If he had a physical relationship with somebody, you just knew it happened somewhere else. It was not, you know, it was not graphic. And maybe that's one of the reasons I enjoyed it. But I read his books as much for the story. There was always a color in the title, the copper-colored sky, there's something or other, this, you know, dark gray, something or other. But for the same reason I enjoyed the P.D. James, because he'd be charging along on the, you know, on the narrative, and then all of a sudden he'd just take a left turn, and there'd be 2 or 3 pages of absolute pure philosophy of what he thought about, and it was beautiful writing.
As you go on, and I started making some notes, and then I thought, do you blog? You need to write this down.
I am about to start a blog.
You start a blog. You have a website.
Yes, I do.
It's Judith Campbell.
Judith Campbell, one word, hyphen, Holy Mysteries. Judith Campbell, one word, hyphen, Holy Mysteries, one word.com.
Okay, which comes up if you write Judith Campbell.
Yeah,
no problem.
Yeah, I'm hard to lose.
But here I'll give you your a blog topic.
Yes.
Discuss authors who are in the vein of your moral teaching.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I kind of use my Facebook page as whenever I get really upset about politics, I do a nice little Facebook rant and then sound off in that direction, because I'm not one to keep my mouth shut about much.
I have a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
This is a series, and I only read book 7, so I didn't know a lot about Olympia and her husband and her cats and her sidekick, Father Jim.
Father Jim.
Which I picked up by and large, but the question as a writer it occurred to me to ask you, how do you decide when you're writing a series how much of the backstory to repeat in each of the books as they come along?
That's a good thing to remind me of, because I got to keep it all in my head when I'm writing the next one, but someone who picks up number 5 or number 6 doesn't know the backstory. And from your saying that, I think I need to do a little bit more about getting it in there. I haven't gotten it in the reviews, and I haven't gotten it from reader emails, but early on, when like number 2 or 3 came out, one of my writing buddies said, I don't know who the ghost is. I don't know who Leah Faith is. I don't know who the daughter is. And so from then on in, I put in bits, and then I started reading other authors with, I mean, every time I read, it's a text.
Yeah,
you know, it's a learning
right.
experience. And how do other series writers get that in there without information? Sorry about that. An information, bad startle reaction. An information dump in the beginning.
Yeah.
And you don't want to do that. So it's a fine line. But what I'm hearing from you is I could probably trickle in a little bit more, and that's good. Thank you for saying that.
And that leads to your next book, which you told me about briefly. Why don't you talk about that? What is the title?
A Twisted Mission.
A Twisted Mission.
Yeah.
Okay, we have an unspeakable, an unholy, a despicable, a singular, so we have all these missions. Now we have a twisted mission.
Well, my books are my mission in so many ways.
That's a nice way of putting it.
A Twisted Mission is actually a prequel. This was the first one.
The Deadly Mission.
A Deadly Mission was the first one. And that came out, it was published in 2010. So another question is, I write about 2 books a year.
My goodness.
Which is, well,
I write.
I write a lot. And so many people wanted to know more about the backstory.
Yes.
How did Olympia get to where they were? How did she meet Father Jim? And I had some of that in there. How did she meet Frederick? So I went back and I wrote A Twisted Mission, which takes place in the early 90s, before computers took over the world, before everybody was living on their cell phone, and wrote how Olympia has come to the point of, does she want to leave academia? She's working as a college professor, which she does in the first 2 books. So she's still a college professor. I send her off to a religious conference center in the south of Maine to be a chaplain for the summer. and where she's going to do some thinking. And during that time, she decides, she buys a house, actually. At the end of the book, she buys a house. So she's going to stay on at the college for at least another year or two, but she's restless. She's ready for time for change. She meets Frederick. We know that Frederick's going to be something new. And she makes a decision that she really must find the daughter she gave up at 17 years old, that she can't talk about.
Okay.
And so all of that is in there. It's referred to in the other books. But it was a real challenge, putting myself back and putting down my own cell phone. And she had to use payphones.
Payphones.
Remember those?
Payphones?
Yeah.
You know.
Newspapers. She read newspapers.
I still do. I read newspapers. So when you talked about the backstory, I just wanted to mention that these books, again, I think we've talked about it a bit, but they deal very sensitively with sensitive issues.
Well, there's abortion in that, too.
You counsel someone who walks in and says, I'm going to have an abortion, and you have to do the dance with her, and you try not to make judgments, and it's comforting. I think people enjoy your books for that reason.
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up, because the abortion issue, I picked up literally I was on a cruise, and I met this lovely young couple who were very, very, very conservative in their feelings about the whole abortion issue. And he challenged me. He said, I challenge you to write something about abortion, because I'm pro-life. I'm not, and I'm also anti-abortion, but I am pro-choice. I'm pro-choice. And so he challenged me to write something about that subject, and I tried very, very hard to show both sides of it. And it was that was one of the subplots. There's lots of subplots in my books.
Lots of subplots, lots of issues.
But I loved writing that and working it through my own mind. And then sometimes I just work out my own mental challenges in my writing.
Well, for anyone who wants to read about current issues, brought into play, into a mystery, with a lot of humor, a lot of warmth for the characters that you've created, I recommend Judith Campbell's Olympia Brown Mystery Series. We're just about out of time. I was wondering if you ever thought you'd depart from Olympia Brown, or do you have any other things working on in your mind, percolating?
Two quick things I'd like to say. One is the book that's about to come out is about bullying.
Okay.
A very timely subject. I'm very comfortable with Olympia right now, but I will be writing some more short stories, and I write poetry and I write children's books, so that happens. And I would like to say where people can get my books.
Please do.
Titcomb's, Brewster Books has carried them. The Provincetown bookstore has some of them. Of course, on the big box, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And
we have to wind up, and I want to mention the libraries. Please go and ask your librarians to buy these books as well and circulate them widely. Go on Overdrive, which is the free ebook downloading system, and learn about that. Thank you, Judy, for coming, and good luck with all of these books. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Madeline. It has been an absolute pleasure talking with you. You ask really good questions.
Oh, goody.
Yeah.